Elena didn't know that the man watching her from across the royal terrace was the Alpha King himself. She didn't know that her fierce declaration had reached his ears through the evening air. And she certainly didn't know that her words, "I will never date anyone," would spark something dangerous and determined in those storm-coloured eyes. "You'll die alone and unwanted," her sister Meredith laughed, voice carrying across the marble balustrade where the kingdom's elite mingled beneath glittering chandeliers. "Look at you, Elena. 25 years old and you've never even properly courted. No man will ever want someone so bitter." Elena's fingers tightened around her borrowed silk gloves, the expensive fabric foreign against her work-rough hands. The cream-coloured dress she wore belonged to Meredith's lady's maid, hastily altered to fit Elena's smaller frame for this royal reception. She didn't belong here among the nobles and their cruel games. "I don't want to be courted," Elena replied, lifting her chin despite the heat climbing her neck. "I've seen what love does to women. It makes them desperate, foolish. I will never date anyone, never give my heart to some man who will only break it when something better comes along." Meredith's friends tittered behind their fans, their eyes glittering with malicious delight. "How wonderfully practical," one of them drawled. "Though I suppose when no one asks, it's easy to claim you're choosing to refuse." The words landed like physical blows. Elena had heard variations of them her entire life, growing up in Meredith's shadow as the unwanted half-sister, the servant's daughter their father had legitimized out of guilt. Every cruel comment, every reminder of her place had built walls around her heart, brick by careful brick. "Excuse me," Elena murmured, turning away from their laughter. She pushed through the crowd, past conversation she couldn't join, and people who looked through her as if she were invisible. The royal gardens beckoned beyond the terrace doors, offering blessed solitude among the moonlit roses. The night air was cool against her heated cheeks as she stepped onto the secluded garden terrace. Stone benches sat empty beneath ancient oak trees, and the sounds of the reception became a distant hum. Here she could breathe. Strong words for someone so young. Eleanor spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A man emerged from the shadows near the fountain, tall and broad-shouldered, in perfectly tailored black. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, the silver threading through dark hair, the way he moved with predatory grace. Dangerous. Everything about him screamed dangerous. "I'm sorry," she stammered, backing toward the terrace doors. "I didn't realize anyone else was here. I'll go." "Stay." The single word carried absolute authority, stopping her retreat mid-step. "I'm curious about your declaration, never dating anyone. That seemed limiting." Heat rushed up Elena's throat. "You were eavesdropping. I was existing in the same space when you chose to speak loudly enough for half the kingdom to hear." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I take it someone hurt you." The casual observation hit too close to truth. Elena's hands clenched into fists. "I don't discuss my personal life with strangers. Reasonable policy." He stepped closer, and something in her chest pulled tight. "Though perhaps we could remedy the stranger part. It doesn't matter who you are," Elena interrupted, surprised by her own boldness. "I meant what I said. I won't be courted or pursued or whatever pretty word men use when they want to take what they please and leave women broken in their wake." "Who said anything about dating?" The question caught her completely off guard. Elena blinked, searching his face for mockery or cruel amusement. Instead, she found genuine curiosity and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. "I'm sorry." "You said you'd never date anyone. I respect that." He moved closer still, close enough that she could smell cedar and winter air on his skin. "But there are other arrangements, partnerships, agreements between equals." "I don't understand." "Smart woman like you, I think you understand perfectly." He extended his hand, palm up. "Tell me, what do you want most in this world?" Elena stared at his offered hand. To be left alone. Liar. The word was soft but absolute. Elena's breath caught as he continued. What you want is to be safe, protected, valued for who you are, instead of dismissed for what you're not. How did he see so clearly what she'd never spoken aloud? Elena's chest ached with the truth of it, the deep hunger she'd buried beneath layers of defensive anger. And what would you know about what I want? I know what it's like to be surrounded by people who see only what they expect to see. His fingers flexed slightly, invitation still extended. I know what it's like to be alone in a crowd. Something in his voice made her look up, really look. Behind the commanding presence and expensive clothes, she glimpsed loneliness as sharp as her own. Without thinking, she placed her hand in his. Fire shot up her arm at the contact, settling somewhere behind her sternum like a second heartbeat. Elena gasped, trying to pull away, but his fingers closed gently around hers. What? I felt it too, he murmured, thumbs stroking across her knuckles. Interesting. Your Majesty? A voice called from the terrace doors. The council members are asking for you. Elena's blood went cold. Majesty. She jerked her gaze up to find storm-grey eyes watching her with unmistakable amusement. The Alpha King, she breathed, guilty as charged. His grip on her hand remained gentle but unbreakable, though I prefer Darius when we're alone. The world tilted sideways. Elena had been holding hands with the Alpha King, arguing with him, telling him she'd never date anyone while standing close enough to count his eyelashes in the moonlight. I have to go, she whispered. Do you? Your Majesty, What did I just say about my name? Eleanor's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The Alpha King, Darius, smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face from commanding to devastating. Think about what I said, Elena, about arrangements that have nothing to do with dating. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing the softest kiss to her knuckles. I'll find you tomorrow. How do you know my name? But he was already walking away, moving toward his waiting advisers with the fluid confidence of a man who ruled kingdoms. Elena stood frozen on the terrace, her hand burning where he'd touched it, her carefully constructed world cracking along fault lines she'd never imagined. The Alpha King knew her name. He'd felt whatever impossible thing had passed between them when their hands touched. And he wanted to see her again. For the first time in her life, Elena wasn't sure if that terrified or thrilled her more. Elena spent the night staring at her ceiling, her hand still tingling where the Alpha King had kissed her knuckles. Every rational thought told her to pack her few belongings and leave the capital before dawn. Nothing good could come from attracting royal attention, especially when that attention came with storm-grey eyes and a touch that set her blood on fire. She was halfway through folding her spare dress when the knock came. "Miss Elena?" The voice belonged to a young palace guard. "His Majesty requests your presence in the rose garden, immediately." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake, miss. He's waiting." The garden looked different in daylight, less magical and more dangerous. Roses climbed the stone walls in careful arrangements, their blooms perfect and untouchable. Like everything else in the royal palace, beauty served a purpose here. Darius stood with his back to the path, hands clasped behind him as he studied a climbing vine heavy with white flowers. In the morning light, he was even more imposing than memory suggested. Broad shoulders filled his dark coat, and when he turned at her approach, those storm-coloured eyes seemed to see straight through her careful defences. "You came. Did I have a choice?" "There's always a choice." He gestured toward a stone bench beneath the arbour, though I hoped curiosity might win over caution. Elena remained standing, every instinct screaming at her to run. "What do you want from me?" "Straight to business. I like that." Darius moved closer, and she caught that scent again, cedar and winter air and something purely him. "I have a proposition." "I told you last night." "You told me you'd never date anyone. I heard you." His mouth curved into that dangerous, almost smile. "This isn't about dating." "Then what?" "I need a companion for the upcoming social season. Someone intelligent, quick-witted, and completely uninterested in romantic entanglements. His eyes held hers steadily. Someone exactly like you. Elena blinked. A companion. The court expects me to appear at various functions with appropriate female company. Normally, that means enduring ambitious mothers throwing their daughters at my feet, hoping to catch a queen's crown. He moved to the bench, settling with fluid grace. But you've already declared yourself uninterested in such things. So you want to use me as, what, a shield? I want to offer you a business arrangement. You accompany me to required social events, deflect unwanted romantic advances, and provide intelligent conversation. In exchange, you receive protection, security, and freedom from your sister's cruelties. The practical offer hit her like a physical blow. Elena had spent years dreaming of escape from Meredith's household, from the constant reminders that she was nobody special, that no one would ever truly want her. Here was the Alpha King offering exactly that freedom. Why me? Because you're the first woman I've met in years who spoke to me like I was just a man. Something flickered across his expression, too quick to catch. Do you know how rare that is? Elena studied his face, searching for mockery or hidden agenda. There have to be strings attached. Men like you don't offer something for nothing. Men like me. Powerful men, kings. She wrapped her arms around herself. I've seen how they operate. They take what they want and leave destruction behind. Ah. Darius leaned back against the bench, and for a moment he looked almost lonely. Someone did hurt you. That's not your concern, isn't it? If we're going to be partners, your past wounds affect our arrangement. His voice gentled. Tell me what happened. No. Eleanor. I said no. The words came out sharper than intended. If this is truly a business partnership, my personal history is irrelevant. Instead of anger, respect flickered in his eyes. Fair enough, but for what it's worth, I understand the impulse to protect yourself. Something in his tone made her look closer. Do you? I've been king for 15 years. In that time, I've had 3 serious relationships. His fingers traced patterns on the stone bench. The first woman loved my crown more than me. The second tried to poison my counsel when I wouldn't make her queen immediately. The third... What happened to the third? She was perfect, beautiful, intelligent, everything a queen should be. His jaw tightened. She was also a spy for the neighbouring kingdom, gathering intelligence while sharing my bed. Elena's breath caught. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me that romantic love and royal duty make poor companions. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Which is why this arrangement could benefit us both. You get security without emotional risk. I get companionship without romantic complications. The logic was sound, almost seductive in its simplicity. Elena could have everything she'd dreamed of, freedom, protection, a place where she belonged, without risking her carefully guarded heart. What exactly would this partnership entail? Public appearances at court functions, private dinners when I need intelligent conversation, travel to diplomatic events where royal protocol requires a female companion. He paused. And occasionally you'd need to stay in the palace guest quarters when events run late. Separate quarters? Completely separate. This is business, not seduction. Eleanor bit her lip, weighing options she'd never imagined having. For how long? The social season runs 4 months. At the end, we reassess. Darius stood, moving closer until she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. I'm offering you freedom, Elena. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. And if I say no, then you go back to your sister's house, back to being invisible and unwanted, back to letting other people define your worth. His voice remained gentle, but the words hit like targeted arrows. Is that really what you want? It wasn't. God help her, it wasn't. 1 month, she said suddenly, a trial period. If either of us is unhappy with the arrangement after 1 month, we end it with no hard feelings. Agreed. He extended his hand, the same gesture from the night before. Partners? Eleanor stared at his palm. knowing that everything would change the moment she touched him again. The smart thing would be to negotiate terms, to establish boundaries, to protect herself from whatever had sparked between them in the moonlight. Instead, she placed her hand in his. The same fire raced up her arm, stronger this time, settling in her chest like molten gold. Darius's fingers tightened around hers, his pupils dilating slightly. "What is that?" she whispered. "I don't know." His thumb traced across her knuckles, the touch sending shivers through her entire body. "But it's not romantic attraction." "How can you be so sure?" "Because this isn't dating," he said, echoing her own words. "This is strictly business." Elena nodded, trying to convince herself that the heat pooling in her stomach had nothing to do with the way he was looking at her mouth. Strictly business. Exactly. But he didn't release her hand, and neither of them stepped away. They stood there in the rose garden, fingers intertwined, both pretending that the electricity crackling between them was purely professional. Elena told herself this was practical, sensible, exactly what she needed to escape her sister's cruelties. She absolutely refused to acknowledge that when Darius finally released her hand and stepped back, she felt cold for the first time since touching him. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Elena had almost convinced herself that the strange warmth in her chest whenever Darius smiled was purely professional appreciation. Almost. "You're staring again," he murmured, not looking up from the trade documents spread across his private study desk. Heat climbed Elena's neck. She'd been perched in the window seat, supposedly reading, but her attention kept drifting to the way afternoon sunlight caught the silver threading through his dark hair. "I was thinking." "About?" "How to explain to your counsel why I'm always here." Eleanor closed her book, a philosophical treatise that was supposed to make her sound educated at tonight's diplomatic dinner. "Lord Garrett looked ready to challenge me to a duel when I disagreed with his trade proposal yesterday." Darius's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "Lord Garrett forgets his place." "His place as your most trusted adviser?" "His place as someone who serves at my pleasure." Darius set down his quill, finally meeting her gaze. "He has no authority over you, Elena. None of them do." Something fierce and protective flickered in those storm-coloured eyes, sending an unexpected thrill through Elena's chest. She'd seen that look before, directed at servants who'd been mistreated or courtiers who'd overstepped bounds. She'd never expected to be on the receiving end of it. "It doesn't matter. I'm nobody special." The words came automatically, armour she'd worn for so long it felt natural. "I'm just your temporary companion." "You're not nobody." The quiet certainty in his voice made her breath catch. "And you're not temporary." Elena's heart stuttered. "Darius." "Your Majesty?" A sharp knock interrupted them. "Lord Garrett requests an immediate audience." Darius's jaw clenched, but he nodded toward the door. "Send him in." Lord Garrett swept into the study with the confidence of a man who'd been welcome in these rooms for decades. Tall and elegant in perfectly tailored burgundy velvet, he possessed the kind of refined handsomeness that made mothers push their daughters forward at court functions. Eleanor had never liked him. "Your Majesty?" Garrett bowed precisely before his pale eyes fixed on Elena. "Miss?" "Elena. How surprising to find you here again." "Elena assists with my correspondence," Darius said smoothly. "Her insights are valuable." "I'm sure they are." Garrett's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Though some might question the wisdom of conducting official business with a woman of such humble origins." Eleanor's fingers tightened on her book. She'd heard variations of this dismissal her entire life, but somehow it stung more coming from someone who'd pretended politeness for 2 weeks. "Is there a point to this visit, Garrett?" Darius's voice carried warning. "Actually, yes. I've received concerning reports about certain court members becoming too familiar with palace staff." His gaze never left Elena's face. "It would be unfortunate if your reputation suffered due to inappropriate associations." The insult landed like a slap. Elena stood slowly, spine straight despite the heat burning her cheeks. I should go. You should stay. Darius rose as well, moving to stand between Eleanor and Garrett with predatory grace. Lord Garrett was just leaving. Was I? Garrett's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. How fascinating that a kitchen maid's bastard daughter commands such loyalty. Tell me, Your Majesty, what exactly has she done to earn such protection? The silence that followed was deadly. When Darius spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of a king who'd commanded armies and conquered kingdoms. You forget yourself, Garrett. Do I? Or do I simply remember my duty to the crown? Garrett's pleasant mask never slipped. The nobles are talking, Your Majesty. They wonder why you've taken such interest in a servant's daughter. Some suggest she's using feminine wiles to manipulate the crown for personal gain. Eleanor's stomach dropped to her boots. This was exactly what she'd feared, exactly why she'd sworn off entanglements with powerful men. They always left destruction in their wake. I won't hear another word against Elena, Darius said, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. Of course not. Love makes fools of even the wisest men. Garrett's smile turned predatory. But perhaps Miss Elena should hear what the court truly thinks of her sudden elevation. Stop! Elena's voice cut through the tension. Both men turned to look at her, but she kept her gaze fixed on Garrett. Say what you came to say. Eleanor, Darius began. No. She held up one hand, still watching Garrett. Let him finish. Garrett's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. They call you the king's whore behind closed doors. They say you spread your legs for a crown and convinced him you're something special when you're nothing but a bastard playing dress-up in borrowed silk. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding the tender places where her deepest fears lived. Eleanor had known this would happen eventually. She'd known that someone would voice the truth she'd been hiding from herself for 2 weeks. She was nothing special. She was a servant's daughter playing at being worthy of a king's attention. And now everyone could see through the illusion. Get out! Darius's voice was deadly quiet. Get out before I have you thrown in the dungeons for treason. For speaking truth. How progressive. But Garrett bowed again. Perfectly correct. I live to serve the crown, Your Majesty, even when the truth is unpleasant. He swept from the room, leaving behind a silence that felt like a tomb. Eleanor stared at the closed door, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She'd been fooling herself, thinking she could belong here even temporarily. People like her didn't get fairy tale partnerships with kings. Elena? Darius's voice was gentle, but she couldn't look at him. You know he's lying. Is he? She finally met his gaze, and something in her chest shattered at the fierce protectiveness she found there. Because from where I'm standing, he sounds remarkably accurate. You are not nothing. You are not. I'm a bastard kitchen maid's daughter, wearing borrowed clothes and pretending to be worthy of your attention. The words came out steady, despite the storm raging in her chest. Maybe it's time we both stopped pretending this arrangement was anything more than charity. That's not what this is, isn't it? Eleanor smoothed her skirts with hands that barely trembled. You needed a companion who wouldn't fall in love with you. I needed an escape from my sister's cruelties. We both got what we wanted. Eleanor, our month is almost up anyway. She moved toward the door, each step feeling like walking through quicksand. Maybe it's time to reassess. She made it 3 steps before his hand closed around her wrist, warm and gentle and absolutely immovable. Don't let him win. The quiet words stopped her retreat. Elena closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. What if he's right? What if I am just a nobody playing dress-up? Then you're the most extraordinary nobody I've ever met. Darius's thumb traced across her pulse point. You challenge my council members when they're wrong. You make me laugh during tedious diplomatic dinners. You're the first person in years who sees me instead of my crown. Darius, stay. The single word carried all the command of a king and all the vulnerability of a man. When this is over, when Garrett's poison has been exposed for what it is, stay." Eleanor opened her eyes to find him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. For a moment she let herself imagine it. Staying, belonging, being worthy of the fierce protectiveness she saw in those storm-coloured eyes. Then reality crashed back down, and she carefully pulled her wrist from his grasp. "I'll stay until the month is finished," she said quietly. "I gave you my word." "And after?" Elena moved toward the door again, not trusting herself to look back. "After, we'll reassess." The royal ball was supposed to be Elena's final public appearance as Darius's companion. Tomorrow their month would be complete, and she could return to whatever life awaited beyond the palace walls. She'd spent 3 days telling herself this was what she wanted. She was still lying to herself when Lord Garrett struck. "Ladies and gentlemen," Garrett's voice cut through the orchestra's waltz, commanding attention with practised ease, "if I may have a moment of your time." Elena's blood chilled as conversations died across the ballroom. Garrett stood near the dais, resplendent in midnight blue velvet, his smile sharp as a blade. She'd been dancing with Darius moments before, lost in the warmth of his hands and the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer. Now she stood frozen on the marble floor, every instinct screaming danger. "Tonight we celebrate the strength of our kingdom and the wisdom of our king," Garrett continued, his pale eyes finding Elena in the crowd. "But I fear there are those among us who would take advantage of royal generosity for personal gain." "What is he doing?" Elena whispered, but Darius was already moving, cutting through the crowd with predatory intent. "Miss Elena," Garrett's voice carried across the ballroom, drawing every eye to her. "Would you join me, please?" The request wasn't really a request. Elena felt the weight of hundreds of stares, the whispered speculations that would follow her for the rest of her life. Darius reached her side, his presence a solid anchor in the storm. "Garrett, enough," he said quietly, but his voice carried the authority of absolute command. "Oh, but your Majesty, surely the court deserves to know the truth about your companion." Garrett's smile never wavered. "After all, we've all been curious about Miss Elena's sudden elevation from kitchen maid's daughter to royal favourite." Elena's worst nightmare was unfolding in front of the entire court. She could feel their shock, their judgment, their cruel satisfaction at seeing someone reach above her station and fall. This was what she'd feared from the beginning, what she'd known would happen eventually. "You forget yourself," Darius said, his tone deadly quiet. "Do I? Or do I simply remember my duty to protect the crown from those who would manipulate it?" Garrett gestured toward Elena with mock courtesy. "Tell me, Miss Elena, what services exactly have you provided to earn such royal favour?" The implication hit like a physical blow. Elena's cheeks burned as scandalised gasps rippled through the crowd. She'd known this moment would come, had prepared for it in the dark hours when sleep eluded her. But knowing and experiencing were different things entirely. "That's enough." Darius stepped forward, and Elena had never seen him look more dangerous. "You will apologise immediately, or you will find yourself in the dungeons." "For speaking truth." Garrett's eyebrows rose in feigned surprise. "Come now, Your Majesty, everyone knows the girl is nothing more than a clever opportunist who saw a chance to better her station through feminine wiles." "She's more than you'll ever be," Darius said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Elena's heart stopped. The fierce protectiveness in his tone, the absolute certainty with which he defended her, was everything she'd never dared hope for and everything she most feared. Because this was exactly how men like him destroyed women like her, by making them believe they were worth defending. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, finding her voice at last. "Please don't." "Don't what? Defend you?" He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his storm-coloured eyes stole her breath. "Elena, you are the smartest, bravest, most honest person in this room. You think I don't know what you've survived, what you've overcome? Stop, she whispered, but he continued as if she hadn't spoken. You want to know what services she's provided? Darius addressed the court, but never looked away from Elena's face. She's reminded me what it means to be human instead of just a crown. She's challenged my decisions when they were wrong and supported them when they were right. She's shown me that intelligence and courage matter more than bloodlines. The ballroom had gone deadly silent. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, not from Garrett's cruelty, but from the devastating tenderness in Darius's voice. She is not my companion, he continued, each word falling like a blade. She is my equal, my partner, my chosen mate. The words hit Elena like lightning. Chosen mate. In front of the entire court, he just claimed her as his equal, his partner, his... No! The word escaped before she could stop it, raw and panicked. No, that's not... We're not... Darius's face went very still. Elena. But she was already backing away, her carefully constructed walls crumbling under the weight of his public declaration. This was too much, too fast, too real. She'd spent a month telling herself this wasn't dating, wasn't romance, wasn't love. Now he'd just claimed her as his mate in front of everyone, and she couldn't breathe. I have to go, she whispered, lifting her skirts as she fled toward the terrace doors. Elena, wait! But she was already running, her borrowed silk slippers echoing against marble as she escaped into the night. Behind her, she could hear the court exploding into speculation, Garrett's satisfied laughter, Darius calling her name. She made it to her chambers before the tears came. Her hands shook as she pulled her travelling bag from beneath the bed. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to leave before this went any further. Darius had just claimed her publicly, had called her his mate, and Elena knew with bone-deep certainty that she wasn't strong enough to survive loving him and losing him. Because that's what would happen eventually. Men like the Alpha King didn't keep women like her. They used them until something better came along, until political necessity required a more suitable match, until the fairy tale crumbled under the weight of reality. Running again? Elena spun around to find Darius standing in her doorway, still wearing his formal court attire, his hair dishevelled as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. The door was unlocked, he said quietly when she didn't respond. I'm packing. Eleanor turned back to her bag, folding her few possessions with mechanical precision. Our month is over anyway. Is it? He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Because I thought we'd moved beyond business arrangements. We haven't moved beyond anything. Elena's voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady. This is exactly what I knew would happen. You got caught up in protecting me and said things you didn't mean. I meant every word. You called me your mate in front of the entire court. Because that's what you are. Darius moved closer, and Eleanor could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Eleanor, look at me. No. If she looked at him, if she saw the tenderness she'd glimpsed in the ballroom, her resolve would crumble completely. This was supposed to be temporary, uncomplicated, no romantic entanglements. When was the last time you felt uncomplicated about me? The quiet question hit its target perfectly. Elena's hands stilled on her packing, because the answer was never. From the moment she touched his hand in the garden, nothing about Darius had felt uncomplicated. That's not the point, she whispered. It isn't it? He was close enough now that she could smell cedar and winter air, could feel the careful control in his voice. Elena, I've spent 15 years ruling this kingdom. I know the difference between duty and desire, between political necessity and personal choice. And which am I? You're the woman I can't stop thinking about. You're the reason I look forward to diplomatic dinners and trade negotiations. You're the person I want to share my victories and failures with. His voice gentled. You're everything I didn't know I needed. Elena closed her eyes against the words that felt too much like everything she'd never dared hope for. You don't understand. I can't be someone's everything. I don't know how. Then let me teach you. The offer hung between them like a bridge she was too terrified to cross. Elena had spent her entire life being nobody special, being overlooked and dismissed and abandoned. The idea of being precious to someone, especially someone like Darius, felt impossible. What if I disappoint you? The words came out barely above a whisper. What if I'm not worth the risk you took tonight? You won't. You are. Darius moved around her until they were face to face, his hands coming up to frame her cheeks. Eleanor, you are worth every risk, every challenge, every moment of doubt. She opened her eyes to find him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. I'm scared. I know. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones, gentle and sure. But I'm not going anywhere. However long you need to trust that, I'm not going anywhere. Eleanor stared up into those storm-coloured eyes and saw the same fear she carried, the same hope she'd buried beneath years of defensive walls. He was just as terrified of being hurt as she was, just as desperate for something real. Maybe that was enough. Maybe fear shared was fear halved. Our arrangement is over, she said quietly. Darius's hands stilled on her face. Elena. Because this isn't business anymore. She reached up to cover his hands with hers. And it isn't dating either. What is it? Elena rose on her toes, closing the distance between them until her lips were a breath away from his. Something real. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Eleanor woke in Darius's arms as dawn painted the sky gold beyond her window. Their first night together hadn't been about passion, though the memory of his kiss still made her pulse quicken, but about something deeper. They'd talked until the early hours, sharing wounds and fears, building trust word by careful word. Good morning, he murmured against her hair, his voice rough with sleep. Is it? Elena traced patterns on his chest through his shirt, marvelling at how right this felt. After last night, I'm not sure what kind of day we're facing. The kind where we figure out what comes next. Darius's hand stroked down her spine, gentle and possessive. Together. The words sent warmth through her chest, but before she could respond, urgent knocking shattered the peaceful morning. Your Majesty! The voice belonged to Captain Marcus, head of the Royal Guard. Emergency Council meeting. Lord Garrett has made formal accusations. Elena's blood went cold. She'd known there would be consequences for Darius's public claiming, but she'd hoped for more time to prepare. What accusations? Darius called, not releasing his hold on Elena. Treason, Your Majesty. He claims Miss Elena has been gathering state secrets for foreign agents. The words hit like physical blows. Elena jerked upright, her carefully rebuilt world crashing down around her. He's lying. I know. Darius sat up beside her, his jaw set in dangerous lines. But we have to answer the charges formally. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for her robe. This is exactly what I was afraid of. He's going to destroy both of us. No. Darius caught her hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. We're going to destroy him, but I need you to trust me. Darius, Eleanor. His voice carried absolute certainty. Do you trust me? She stared into those storm-coloured eyes and found her answer in the fierce protectiveness she saw there. Yes. Then let me handle this. The emergency council session was a carefully orchestrated trial. Lord Garrett sat at the head of the council table, surrounded by documents and wearing an expression of grave concern. Other lords filled the remaining seats, their faces ranging from curious to hostile. Elena stood in the centre of the room like an accused criminal, still wearing the simple grey dress she'd hastily thrown on. Darius had taken his place on the throne, every inch the commanding king, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. The evidence is overwhelming, Garrett was saying, spreading papers across the table. Miss Eleanor has had access to state documents for weeks. She's been present during sensitive discussions about trade agreements with the neighbouring kingdoms. Access I granted her, Darius said coldly. Which raises questions about your judgment, Your Majesty. Lord Pemberton, one of Garrett's allies, leaned forward. Why would you give a servant's daughter access to state secrets? Because she's intelligent enough to understand them and trustworthy enough to protect them. Trustworthy? Garrett laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Your Majesty, I have testimony from palace staff that Miss Elena has been seen in the archives after hours, copying documents. That's a lie, Elena said, finding her voice at last. Is it? Garrett's pale eyes glittered with satisfaction. Then perhaps you can explain these? He produced a stack of papers from his coat, spreading them across the table. Elena's heart sank as she recognized copies of trade agreements, diplomatic correspondence, strategic documents, all in her handwriting. I copied those for Darius, she said desperately. He asked me to transcribe them for his personal files. Convenient. Lord Pemberton examined the papers with obvious scepticism. Though I see no official seal or signature authorizing such transcriptions. Elena's mouth went dry. She'd been copying documents for Darius as part of their arrangement, helping him organize his correspondence and maintain his personal records. She'd never thought to ask for written authorization. The king's word is authorization enough, Darius said, his voice deadly quiet. Of course, Your Majesty, but surely you can see how this appears to outside observers. Garrett's tone was respectful, but his words carried poison. A foreign agent could hardly ask for better cover than romantic involvement with the crown. I'm not a foreign agent, Elena said, her voice stronger now. I've never betrayed the kingdom's trust. Haven't you? Garrett stood, moving to stand directly in front of her. Tell the council, Miss Elena, where were you born? Elena's heart stuttered. Here, in the capital. Which district? The Western Quarter. Interesting, because my investigation shows no birth records for you in the Western Quarter, or any quarter for that matter. Garrett's smile was triumphant. In fact, there are no official records of your existence at all until you appeared in your sister's household 15 years ago. The room went deadly silent. Eleanor felt the weight of every stare, the suspicion and doubt growing like poison in the air. She'd known this day would come eventually, when someone would dig deep enough to uncover the truth she'd been hiding her entire life. I was born in the borderlands, she said quietly. My mother brought me to the capital when I was 10. The borderlands. Garrett's voice carried satisfaction. How very convenient. The same borderlands currently in dispute with our neighbours. The same region where foreign spies are known to recruit local assets. Eleanor's world tilted sideways. She could see the doubt spreading across the council members' faces, the way they leaned away from her as if proximity might contaminate them. This was her worst nightmare realised, being exposed, questioned, found wanting. That's enough, Darius said, rising from the throne with predatory grace. Lord Garrett, you will cease this interrogation immediately. I'm afraid I cannot, Your Majesty. The security of the kingdom is at stake. Garrett turned back to Elena. Tell us, Miss Elena, did your mother ever speak of her homeland? Did she maintain contact with anyone across the border? She died when I was 12, Elena whispered. She never spoke of the past. How convenient. No witnesses, no documentation, no way to verify your story. Garrett's voice carried across the chamber. My lords, I submit that we have a foreign agent in our midst, one who has used her feminine wiles to compromise our king and gain access to state secrets. You're wrong. Elena's voice cracked with desperation. I would never betray the kingdom. I would never betray Darius. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air like a blade. Elena stared at Garrett's triumphant face and felt everything she'd built crumbling around her. How could she prove a negative? How could she demonstrate loyalty when every fact of her life had been twisted into evidence of betrayal? I don't know how, she admitted, the words barely audible. Then perhaps, Garrett began, I know how. Darius's voice cut through the chamber like a sword. Elena, do you remember what I told you about my 3 previous relationships? Elena blinked, confused by the sudden change of topic. Yes. Tell the council what happened to the 3rd woman. Understanding dawned like lightning. Elena straightened, meeting Garrett's gaze directly. She was a spy for the neighbouring kingdom. She gathered intelligence while sharing the king's bed. And how did I discover her betrayal? Darius continued. She had documents hidden in her chambers, secret communications with her handlers. Elena's voice grew stronger. You found them during a surprise search. Search my chambers, Elena said suddenly, addressing the full council. Search them now. If I'm a spy, if I'm gathering intelligence, you'll find evidence. Hidden documents, secret communications, payment from foreign handlers. Search everything. The council members exchanged glances. Lord Pemberton cleared his throat. That's not necessary. No, I insist. Elena stepped forward, her chin raised in challenge. Lord Garrett has made serious accusations. Let him prove them. Let him find a single piece of evidence that I've betrayed the kingdom's trust. Garrett's confident mask flickered for just a moment. The documents we've already seen are copies made at the king's request for legitimate purposes, but if I'm a spy, there will be more. There will be communications with handlers, maps of strategic locations, payment from foreign governments. Elena's voice rang across the chamber. Search everything. Prove your accusations or withdraw them. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Elena held Garrett's gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs, knowing she was betting everything on her innocence. Very well, Darius said finally. Captain Marcus, conduct a thorough search of Miss Elena's chambers. Lord Garrett will accompany you to ensure nothing is overlooked. Your Majesty, I don't think, Garrett began. You've made serious accusations, my lord. I'm giving you the opportunity to prove them. Darius's smile was sharp as a blade. Surely you wouldn't make such claims without absolute certainty. 2 hours later, Captain Marcus returned with grim satisfaction. No evidence of espionage, Your Majesty. No hidden documents, no suspicious communications, no foreign payments. Miss Eleanor's chambers contain exactly what you'd expect. Clothing, books, and personal correspondence with her sister. Elena's knees nearly buckled with relief. Beside her, Darius's hand found hers, squeezing gently. However, Captain Marcus continued, we did find something interesting in Lord Garrett's chambers. Garrett went very still. Letters detailing payments from foreign agents, maps of palace security, and a plan to discredit Miss Elena and destabilise the crown through false accusations. Marcus's voice carried across the silent chamber. Lord Garrett, you are under arrest for treason. The explosion of voices was deafening. Council members shouted questions and accusations while guards moved to surround Garrett. Elena watched it all through a haze of disbelief and relief. You did this, Garrett snarled at Darius as the guards seized him. You planted that evidence. I don't need to plant evidence against guilty men, Darius replied calmly. Take him away. As the guards dragged Garrett from the chamber, Eleanor finally allowed herself to breathe. She'd been willing to trust, to fight, to risk everything for love, and somehow, impossibly, it had been enough. The charges against Miss Elena are dismissed, Darius announced to the remaining council members, and let this serve as a reminder that I choose my companions, my queen, based on character, not birthright. Queen. Elena's heart stopped as the word echoed through the chamber. Around the table, council members bowed their heads in acknowledgement. All hail Queen Elena, Lord Pemberton said quietly. All hail the Queen, the others echoed. Elena stared at Darius in shock, but he was already moving toward her, his eyes warm with love and fierce pride. Marry me, he said, loud enough for the entire council to hear. Not because of duty or arrangement or political necessity. Marry me, because I love you, and I can't imagine ruling this kingdom without you." Elena looked into his storm-coloured eyes and saw her future there, challenging and beautiful and real. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "yes." When he kissed her in front of the council, it tasted like victory and love and coming home. 3 months later, Elena stood before the mirror in the royal chambers, adjusting the delicate silver crown that still felt foreign against her temples. The woman staring back at her looked confident, regal, nothing like the frightened girl who'd hidden behind library shelves and sworn off love forever. "Having second thoughts?" Darius asked from the doorway, already dressed for the day's council meetings. "About the crown? Always." Elena turned to face him, warmth spreading through her chest at the familiar sight of him. "About you? Never." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with the easy intimacy that had grown between them. "Good, because I have a confession." "Oh? I lied to you that first night in the garden." His storm-coloured eyes sparkled with mischief. "When I said this had nothing to do with dating." Eleanor laughed, the sound bright in the morning sunlight streaming through their windows. "You did not." "I absolutely did. I knew from the moment you touched my hand that you were mine. I just had to convince you to stop running long enough to figure it out." His thumb traced along her jawline. "Though I have to admit, your never dating anyone declaration made things interesting." "Interesting is one word for it." Elena rose on her toes to kiss him softly. "Terrifying might be more accurate." "For both of us," Darius murmured against her lips. "I spent weeks trying to convince myself this was purely business. And now? Now I can't imagine a single day without you challenging my council members and making me laugh and reminding me why being king is worth the responsibility." He pulled back to study her face. "Speaking of which, are you ready for today?" Elena's stomach fluttered with nerves. Today marked her first official audience as queen, where she would hear petitions and make decisions that affected the kingdom. 3 months ago, she would have been terrified by such responsibility. Now, with Darius's steady presence beside her, she felt ready for the challenge. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Your Majesties," a soft knock interrupted them. "Lady Meredith has arrived for her appointment." Elena's breath caught. Her sister had requested a private audience 2 weeks ago, the first communication between them since Elena's coronation. Elena had debated whether to grant it, but curiosity had won over caution. "Send her in," Elena called. Meredith entered with the careful grace Elena remembered, but something had changed. Gone was the cold superiority, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. She curtsied deeply, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Your Majesty." "Meredith?" Elena kept her voice neutral, though Darius's presence at her shoulder gave her strength. "You asked to see me." "I did." Meredith raised her head, and Elena was startled to see genuine remorse in her eyes. "I wanted to apologize for everything." Elena studied her sister's face, searching for the manipulation she'd learned to expect. Instead, she found what looked like genuine regret. "I was cruel to you for so many years," Meredith continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told myself it was because you were father's bastard, because you didn't belong, because you were nothing special. But the truth is, I was jealous." "Jealous?" Elena couldn't hide her surprise. "Of what?" "Of your strength, your kindness, your ability to remain good despite everything I did to break you." Tears gathered in Meredith's eyes. "You became everything I could never be, and I hated you for it." The words hung in the air between them. Elena felt the familiar ache of old wounds, the echo of every cruel comment and dismissive laugh. But underneath the hurt, she found something unexpected. Pity. "I'm sorry too," Elena said quietly. "For carrying anger I should have released years ago." You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. Meredith's voice cracked. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. Not because I expect you to welcome me back, but because I need you to know that I see now who you really are, who you always were. Elena felt Darius's hand settle warm and steady on her shoulder. His presence reminded her of the woman she'd become, the strength she'd found, the love she'd learned to accept. I forgive you, she said, and meant it. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past, Meredith. If we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship, it has to be based on who we are now, not who we were. I understand. Meredith nodded, relief evident in her posture. Thank you, Elena, Your Majesty. After Meredith left, Elena remained at the window, processing the conversation. Darius moved to stand beside her, not speaking, simply offering his presence as she worked through her emotions. I thought I'd feel different, Elena said finally. Angrier, maybe, or more satisfied. How do you feel? Free. She turned to look at him, like I can finally let go of the last piece of who I used to be. The frightened girl who thought she was nobody special? Exactly. Elena smiled, and the expression felt light as air. Though I have to ask, when exactly did you know, really know, that you were meant to be mine? Darius's arm came around her waist, pulling her close. The moment you told me you'd never date anyone, I thought, perfect, I don't want to date you either. I want to marry you. You did not. I absolutely did, though I had the good sense not to say it out loud. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You would have run screaming. I would have, Elena agreed. Good thing you were patient. Good thing you were brave enough to stay. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the kingdom spread out below their windows. Elena marvelled at how different the view looked now, how the same landscape could appear so changed when seen through eyes unclouded by fear. Do you ever regret it, she asked, choosing someone like me instead of a proper princess with impeccable bloodlines? Eleanor. Darius turned her to face him fully, his expression serious. You are the only woman I've ever met who sees me instead of my crown. You challenge me when I'm wrong, support me when I'm right, and make me laugh when I take myself too seriously. You're exactly the queen this kingdom needs, and exactly the woman I need. Even though I swore I'd never date anyone? Especially because you swore you'd never date anyone. His smile turned wicked. After all, we're not dating. No? Absolutely not. We're married. Completely different thing. Elena laughed, the sound echoing off the chamber walls. I love you. I love you too. He kissed her then, deep and sure and full of promise. Even if you are terrible at keeping your own declarations. What do you mean? You said you'd never date anyone. Darius's eyes danced with mischief. But you never said anything about falling in love with a king. Technicality, Elena protested. The best kind. He spun her around the chamber, both of them laughing like children. So what do you say, Your Majesty? Still planning to never date anyone? Elena considered the question with mock seriousness, her heart full to bursting with joy and love, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Never, she said firmly. I'm far too busy being married to the love of my life. Good answer. When he kissed her again, Elena thought about the frightened woman who'd stood in this same palace months ago, convinced she was nobody special, terrified of risking her heart. That woman had been wrong about so many things. She'd been wrong about love making women weak. Love had made Elena stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. She'd been wrong about powerful men leaving destruction in their wake. Darius had healed every wound he'd touched, and she'd been especially wrong about never dating anyone. Because while technically they'd never gone on a single date, they'd built something infinitely better. They'd built a love story that would last forever. 1 year later, as Eleanor held their newborn daughter in her arms while Darius looked on with wonder, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. Their daughter had her father's storm-coloured eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that this little girl would grow up knowing she was precious, wanted, worthy of every good thing the world had to offer. "What should we name her?" Darius asked, his finger gently stroking their daughter's tiny hand. "Hope," Elena said without hesitation. "We should name her Hope." Because that's what their love story really was, proof that hope could triumph over fear, that taking risks could lead to unimaginable joy, and that sometimes the best things happened when you were brave enough to break your own rules. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments and share our thoughts about Elena and Darius's journey. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free and it helps more people discover these stories. I love hearing from you, and I can't wait to bring you more tales of love conquering fear.